Hey, nice Atypical Daydream t-shirt.
Thanks. It's my favorite podcast.
Mine too. But where can I get a t-shirt?
It's easy. The link is in the show notes.
That is easy. I'm gonna go get one right now.
That's a great idea.
Thanks. Bye.
You bet. Stay cool.
When we get home, she, threw her tantrum that she always does, screaming and yelling and throwing stuff around. And then she, crumpled up my piano book, screaming at the top of her lungs.
Hello, my atypical daydreamers. Welcome to the show. My first story comes from Nancy Chang. She's a DJ based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Her story isn't exactly about life on the road, but it's definitely part of her origin story. Something wild that shaped her into the performer and musician she is today.
This is probably the first story that I tell anybody that I'm starting to become friends with or something, just because, especially back then, when you're friends with all these Burning Man kids, they were called the Orange Kids. It's everything in California is kind of shock value in stories or something. You want to be guess what this story is? Boom. That's how everyone sort of is. It sounds like it's going to be depressing, but it's not really because of how much I've grown from it. But I guess the reason why I got so into music was because I would always be taking piano lessons, from my mom when I was young. Well, when I was 3, I did, and then I stopped for a while. And then I remember going back when I was probably 11. And then my mom wanted me to be a concert pianist, like any Chinese mom does, So she's putting $12 a week into making sure I get high quality piano lessons. And so I'm moving up, I am a fast learner and stuff. And I was really inspired at first, until she just made it such a militant job, and to the point where I would be practicing and falling asleep at the piano. It's funny because it was a Beethoven song, Ode to Joy, which is his ugliest song ever. This song, I fucking hated the song. I had to play it. Every time my teacher reassigned it to me, my mom saw it as a failure because I was redoing it, so she saw it as you're doing it again. And this is the 5th time, I've perfected this fucking song. Can you just let me go? It's exact on the metronome. Oh, except for one half rest. She made me redo it again. I'm sitting there I'm just looking into the future of my mom beating me up or something. Or, I didn't know. Well, she actually never beat me up so much as this time. But she was so pissed. And then she was looking at my book before we left the house of my piano teacher, and she's just flipping out, screaming. I don't know, I think I blacked out or something on the ride home because she was just freaking out about how I'm wasting her money and stuff like that. And we get home, she, threw her tantrum that she always does, screaming and yelling and throwing stuff around. And then she crumpled up my piano book, screaming at the top of her lungs, throws it on the floor, and then she just hikes up her dress and pisses on it. A whole bunch of piss. It was just splashing everywhere. And then she made me clean it up. So I had to clean it up, right? And then go practice for for I don't even know how many hours, 3 hours or something. Oh, and before that, actually, she hit me with a broomstick a million times. So I was bruised on my back. But I don't really remember that as much, except for my dad came home. And he was how are you? My dad was always the sweetest. And he's patting me on the back. I'm ow. There's, my back's I don't know, what does it look like? And he looked at my back and flipped out, I guess, because it was really, really bad. I didn't even tell him, I don't think, about the piss part, which is what I've always been telling people to put in a movie or something. I'm please put that part in something. But it's just such a crazy story that, I don't know, it kind of stunted my wanting to play piano and stuff, but I'm really good at synths, and I'm really into music still as a release of things. And when I was 14, I wrote this whole long letter, I remember, in green pen to Pearl Jam. And I just was Eddie, I love you. I want you to know my story. And I'm so happy that you guys do I don't know, he used to the whole band would do some sort of charities for like battered children or some shit, you know? And so they didn't respond. I really wanted him to just write back to me, but they put me in their fan club, and I got like so many vinyls and stuff like all the time. They're all at my mom's house, but it's like they're probably worth tons of money. So I was like collecting lots of vinyls before I was even a DJ, and it kind of got me into loving vinyl, I guess, when I was like 14. And every time I tell a story, it's people are always just like, oh my God, the room's all quiet. But I'm like, actually, because the more you talk about something like that, the more you get over it. And so it's not painful at all. And it embarrasses the fuck out of my mom. So it's funny to me because she likes to deny it. But that's like a weird Chinese, it's a cultural thing to like be like, what's wrong with like corporal punishment? That's not weird. But to me, I thought it was like so special that she pissed everywhere and I could have that special part of the story.
Hey, it's Josh. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. And if so, are you wanting more road stories? Well, good news. I've got you covered. Consider becoming a patron. You'll have access to loads of great bonus stories that there just wasn't time for. And you'll be supporting a truly independent podcast. Find the link in the show notes. And thanks. Now back to the show. My next guest is Robb Gilbear. Now, I spent a lot of time exploring the rave dance scene of Southern California, so I could really hear and feel this story. It was a joy to create. Robb takes us through a typical night as a raver, but ends with a disastrous twist.
My first career was as a DJ, a music producer, and record label owner. And I made a life of it. I toured from coast to coast, played in 60 different cities, got to play in Europe, played at Burning Man a few times, played at Ultra Music Festival in Miami. Like I made a thing of it, and it was incredible. And it was rooted in my love of music and rooted in my love of raving. I was a raver in the 90s, and raving got me out of small town life, where I felt that the only options really were to get a job in the neighboring town's car factory, join the army like my parents, like my dad was, or get in trouble with the law, continue selling drugs and steal and stuff. And it didn't feel like the right path for me. I didn't want to choose one of those paths. And being introduced to raves and going to these big raves in Toronto, I felt that I'd found a utopia where it was people from all walks of life, age, gender, ethnicity, and having all of these different people dance under one roof really opened my mind to like, oh, there is a whole other universe out there outside of these little small walls that I had encountered in my small town that I grew up in. And because I lived a couple hours away from Toronto, there were some entrepreneurial teens who'd figured out that they could make money off shuttling people to the big parties in the city. And they made arrangements with the promoters of these big events and said, hey, I'm going to guarantee you 50 to 70 people are going to come. I'm going to fill a whole busload. And to be able to bring you this busload, all I'm asking for in return is a couple free tickets and that the people who come on our bus get to cut the line. And for us, for me as a party goer, it was the best deal because it was, I paid an extra $5 or $10, got a direct drive, didn't worry about who was driving, if anyone was drunk or on drugs, sober. And then we got to skip queue. There'd be 1,000, 2,000, 4,000 kids in line waiting to get into this warehouse or rave, and we would cut the entire queue. And it was incredible. It really was cool. On one particular night, and I know the exact date because I still have the newspaper clipping, and it is September 9th, 1995, I made my own way to the party with the intention that I would just pay the $5 and get on the bus with everyone on the way home. So I went, I met up with friends, danced all night, had a really great time. And then in the morning, I met up with the people who were on part of the shuttle. I gave the person $5 and walked out with them. We walked to the back of the building and there wasn't a bus. There was a U-Haul truck. I'd never seen that before. Instead of renting a bus, they had a U-Haul truck. And I paused and I thought, this doesn't seem right. And they opened it up. And they'd laid out mattresses on the back of the U-Haul truck floor. And as I was hesitating to get in, a friend of mine looked at me and said, "Don't worry, it's more comfortable than it appears." So I was stuck. I'd been up all night. I needed to get home. I just got in. And we were about halfway home when I felt that familiar feeling in my stomach, the roller coaster feeling, like you're dropping off of something. The truck had gone off the road, soared in the air, and landed in a ditch, a 15-foot drop. There were screams and all sorts of loud sounds, and it was absolute chaos. Once we landed, I was an entanglement of people. There's people on the side of me. There was someone bleeding. There was screeches. It was pure pandemonium. There was 33 of us in the back of that van, and slowly poured out. The injuries were broken ankles. Someone had a broken jaw. Someone had a broken back. There were so many injuries that they sent an ambulance bus. I'd never seen such a thing. And as we were filing out and assessing the situation, I overheard the gray-haired senior police officer on the scene. And he said, if the ground wasn't wet, the truck would have bounced and rolled. And it would have been a 50% fatality rate. Half of you would have died. So a few days of rain had saved our asses. A few days of rain made it so that when we flew off the road, the truck just sunk into the ground instead of half of us dying. And it turned out that the person driving had a seizure at the wheel, lost control, and that's why we went flying off and into the ditch. And then the police were trying to prove that he was under the influence of drugs. They couldn't prove that. And then so it was just like, oh, medical condition, he had a seizure. And then there was a whole thing with insurance with U-Haul because they had rented out the truck under the pretense that someone was moving. They definitely didn't expect that 33 teens were going to be piling into the back of this and using it as a shuttle to an all-night rave. Other than it being in the papers, other than it scaring everyone's parents, and other than it like affecting everyone with the injuries, and then the fear, like there was no repercussions. He didn't get fined, he didn't get charged, and like nothing legally came out of it.
I want to thank Nancy and Rob for sharing their experiences. Be sure to check out Rob's book, Die Before They Do, and his newsletter, Growth Habit. Links in the show notes. This podcast is created and produced by me, Josh Caldwell. Music by Visual Aid, my side music project. General support and copywriting by Miranda Caldwell. And if you know someone who you think might enjoy this show, send them this episode. The support really helps. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come back next time.